welcome to the A Show. This is a special edition coming to you the top of the week, not in the middle of the week. I'm Justin. I'm here with Meals. What's going on, Oos?
Listen, a special bonus surprise episode. It's the Beyonce podcast. It's the self-titled. It's everything like that. No, I mean, I'm doing great. This is one of the first of many things that we're doing this week. This is RNC Decade Week. It's a week where we look back at the decade of pop culture and wrestling and sports and music and all these other type of things, just to celebrate. Like, yo, we're really ending one decade and entering whatever the 20s. I hope like another Great Depression doesn't show up, but like, yeah, we're entering. Oh, wow. That's what I remember the 20s from, because
that was dark. It was really dark.
That's my history. That's my history knowledge. I don't remember what happened in 1910s or anything like that. Like what? Prohibition? I don't remember.
So for this show, obviously following with the RNC Decade label, we are talking about some of the biggest moments in wrestling, pro wrestling for the decade, 10 years. Even though a show has been around for a year, we are going to break down the last 10. But just, in a really quick, it's a very quick pocket-sized episode just to give you guys some extra content to go along with what we have this week as well for the A-Show network within RNC Radio. We're going to have our best matches. We're going to announce those as well, right, Mills?
Yes, we're going to announce best matches. All four of us who's in the A-Show network. That is myself. That is you, Justin. That is Cyrus. You can follow him at H_visibility. You can follow Kalo at AirKalo. And we're all dropping our top 10 matches, period, of the decade. Not just WWE, everywhere. So that should be interesting. You should look out for that pretty soon. If not today, it will definitely come sometime this week. Maybe before A-Show, at least before A-Show for sure. But yeah, man, this feels like an incredible week. It's great to look back at the decade of wrestling, because things have just, from where we were in 2010 to me not generally being interested in really professional wrestling and kind of like us kind of going through the motions, to this kind of like a lively, like living, breathing, fully grown, walking on its 2 feet, like the transformation of professional wrestling. Like each decade, I feel like it goes up, but this one, we kind of really just like exponentially went to the next level.
Yeah, it was a quantum leap this decade. I think there were so many things that, and we'll talk about this in the show. Like, there were so many things that kind of changed the path of pro wrestling this year, where it was like, you don't have to like in the previous decade, the 2000s, it was like indies were just kind of starting up, like we weren't really sure about a lot of things. And then this decade, it just blew up. Like you had just the prominence of the indies, the prominence of so many choices. And I think the beginning of the decade, there weren't very many. There was, Impact and ROH and New Japan, of course, but then it was like indies were kind of still on the, kind of like the 4th or 5th thing that you would go towards. Now, right. I would say like today, indies are like the 2nd or 3rd thing for a lot of people.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy how much of the professional wrestling business, and so prominent ones too, because like we said, last decade, kind of the end of WCW, maybe the rise of TNA, and then ROH was just coming to its own thing, a few other companies, but now it's kind of like this thriving thing with so many superstars, so many professional wrestlers, so much. This is honestly probably the best era of professional wrestling that's gone on, period. That we're in right now.
I would agree. I mean, we talk a lot of shit about it. A lot of people have so many differing points of views about what, who's doing what these people represent, et cetera, et cetera. But at the end of the day, like, the product is now literally for everybody. Like, there is so many choices where it's like, you don't have to care or even watch certain things because you have so many choices now. So let's just jump right into it. We have a couple of things on our list that we're going to run through. First off, and you added this one, Mills, Impact Wrestling, their woes throughout the decade.
So I picked this one in terms of just like, and we're not counting down the moments. We're just freely talking about moments and things that have affected and have just been prominent this entire decade. But Impact Wrestling from where it started, and legitimately the first show of the decade was where things were supposed to turn. Because I don't know if you remember this, the January 4th, 2010 show.
Yes.
It was airing alongside the return of Bret Hart to WWE television. And at the beginning of the decade in TNA, it was Eric Bischoff and Hulk Hogan coming into power for TNA.
Monday Night Wars back.
The Monday Night Wars are back. To be honest, it's a great show. If you watch it back now, I mean, I feel like the main event was AJ Styles versus I forgot who, but I mean, just the fact that AJ Styles is there. There was Mick Foley was there. A lot of people from like the Kevin Nash, Scott Hall, Sean Waltman, a lot of different faces and a lot of different people. Oh, in the main event, AJ Styles versus Kurt Angle for the TNA World Heavyweight Championship. A great, showcase of kind of what things is. And just kind of, they made their attempt, but this proved to be like one of the first of many poor decisions kind of made from TNA. And
there were so many things that like, I mean, you start off with that when it was like, okay, they brought Hulk Hogan in and Eric Bischoff, and he said, man, fuck the 6-sided ring, man.
Yeah. Bruh, he was like, yo, that's tacky. Let's take that out, please.
He said, was fuck this 6-sided ring. Fuck all this. Everyone's getting an opportunity. And then it led into like shit, like, out of that, like the aces and eights angles.
Mm-hmm. I mean, the Monday Night Wars lasted for 5 months because while TNA did get a lot of their like highest viewership ever, they were just getting completely stomped and smashed by WWE. Like it wasn't even close. And then you look at even the following year, the kind of disastrous main event, Victory Road 2011, Jeff Hardy versus Sting. Just being another kind of stain on the decade of TNA. And then you go down further and it's the whole back and forth with Billy Corgan and Dixie Carter and the selling of TNA and TNA owing people a lot of money and all this other type of things, people, talent not getting paid.
Not only people like not getting paid, them like their ownership itself changing hands so many times, like from Panda Energy to then Anthem, and then now it's like
I think it's still Anthem, isn't it?
I think it's still Anthem, but it's like Anthem having to like bow down and kiss the ring and kind of like work with WWE,
and then bringing back in Jeff Jarrett, and then Jeff Jarrett immediately exiting like a couple months later. Like there's so many things that have happened to TNA, and none of it has been particularly, I think probably the only saving grace of it has been the talent, right?
Yeah. I mean, for sure. And their talent was their biggest commodity. It was their biggest asset. And you saw they did so many things this decade to push them into the arms of other people. There's no AJ Styles in WWE if they treated him right. If they didn't lowball him on a contract and cause him to go to ROH and New Japan, which caused WWE to finally be like, you know what, we can finally get him.
Right.
And that was all Impact's fault.
And I mean, it's not only that, there was a large exodus of talent. I mean, everyone left. Everyone who was notable from the last decade left and kind of went back to WWE or in independence. I mean, Awesome Kong left for a short stint, became Karma in the WWE. Bobby Lashley left. AJ Styles left. Christian Cage left. Kurt Angle left. Gail Kim left. EC3 left. Sting left. Sting, of all people, Sting left.
Let's talk about that. Sting finally showed up in the WWE after what, like 3 decades?
Sting finally showed up. And to be honest with you, I think if he showed up last decade, I don't know what would have happened. I mean, I think he would have had a lot more matches under his belt. Don't get me wrong.
Oh, he wouldn't have got clapped that quickly.
Oh, nah. I mean, from a physical standpoint, yes, he took way too long to come from just like working with your body. But we've seen people. I mean, we've seen even at the beginning of this decade. I mean, Bret Hart, who does not wrestled in one of the main events for WrestleMania at WrestleMania 26 or something. But if he didn't choose to come, but I still think the current climate of the WWE, it was probably the best era for him to show up in because he was kind of treated like the star that he was. He was treated like the legend. He was the man they call Sting. He was given a high profile match. He was given a high profile debut. A a lot of things that didn't necessarily happen to a lot of WCW guys that came in the last decade. I mean, even
because like a lot of the that type of shit is smoothed over, or it was like Vince isn't going to treat them like, you know, like shit anymore. And I think that like a lot of people they'll rag on the Triple H Sting match, but it's like, how else would you expect that to end?
Right. I mean, well, actually, no. I mean, it could have.
He's fucking Sting, bro. Fuck Sting, bro.
I mean, but Triple H is going to be there forever. Let's give Sting. Sting had one WrestleMania match. He is 0 for 1. He is. It is not good.
Well, that's because his back is made out of Pringles.
Oh my God!
Seth Rollins, the God.
Wow.
Tried to have a 5-star match with him. He crumbled like a little bitch.
Wow. The disrespect for Sting. You know what? I'll say this on behalf of all the, I don't know what they call it, stingers, sting heads.
Sting heads.
I appreciated the time that Sting was there in the WWE. And yes, he's professionally retired, entered the WWE Hall of Fame, has spent his joyous times just donning the mask and showing up random places. It was a great way to go out, to be honest with you. Yeah, I mean, it could have been better. It could have been better. Don't get me wrong.
Perfect way to go out with him on his knees shaking.
Oh my God! Well, he wasn't the only return this decade, because also Goldberg.
Yes, Goldberg came back.
Goldberg, who we never thought in his life, especially the way he left WWE before, never really thought he would come back to professional wrestling. Also, he's also very, very old. But even Goldberg himself, that's why I'm saying, like, this is probably the best era, because you look at what happened in 2004, which is closer to Goldberg's actual prime and kind of how they used him and things like that. I mean, I know the circumstances was he signed a 1-year contract, so it's not like they were going to really push him to the moon. But the way they use him in 2017, 2018, as opposed to using him in 2003, 2004, is just a complete world of change.
Perfect. I think that they finally got it. I think that they understood that this is a force. He's the force of nature. Mm-hmm. You know, he is literally, you know, to steal from, you know, the #1 movie in the world right now. Like, he's literally Godzilla. You know, like he is the king of these 2-second matches. I think there was nothing more awesome than Brock and Goldberg at Survivor Series. Brock beating him in 18 seconds?
Like, no. Goldberg beat him.
I mean, that's what I meant. Like, Goldberg beat him like 18 seconds, and then it started the storyline of like Brock spiraling because he couldn't beat him.
Right, and it's just a great story to tell. I think WWE got their stories completely right. And when you talk about Brock Lesnar too, I think Brock Lesnar sets the standard for how WWE treated these big names that return, and being able to treat part-time people and still draw massive amount of attention to them, because Brock Lesnar returned to WWE this decade as well after, leaving the same time Goldberg did, pretty much, WrestleMania 20, 2004. He returned to the WWE, and just his run. I mean, I think we have to talk kind of a little bit long form about Brock Lesnar, because Brock Lesnar's return to the WWE, it shifted kind of how they use their major business model. Like, the traction became a little bit different. It didn't become like, we're going to use people here and there and da-da-da. It's like, we're doing these big matches at these big events, and it's going to draw a house. And Brock Lesnar proved that he's one of the biggest draws in professional wrestling, period.
Yeah, and I think Brock is the linchpin of a lot of different, you know, good and bad, storyline wise, outside the ring wise, you know, things that WWE like to do. That being part-timers, being more prominent, but and kind of Brock started that. But Brock is there are so many people on this list that are big names and did big things. Brock beat the streak this year, and I think that makes him automatically, like, you want to talk about Hall of Fame? He deserves his own wing at this point, you know? Like, this guy is unbelievable. Like, whether you love him or hate him, he has literally been booked to be like the Bruno Sammartino of this fucking decade. Like, this is a guy that doesn't lose that much. He's always given, you know, first class booking, everything. And that is off of the fact that, you know, they finally realized that you need a spectacle. You need someone who shows up and has a big match, do you remember the John Cena match?
I remember 100%, man. I remember, first of all, that match is an anomaly compared to the other Brock Lesnar matches that have happened. Like,
it was hard to watch.
That first year of Brock Lesnar, I still think they were figuring it out, and it didn't hit until he beat the streak that they kind of figured out like how they can kind of use him. Because that first year he was like, I wouldn't say wrestling, but he was having these very long matches, like these long back and forth matches. He had a match with his return match against John Cena, his long feud with Triple H, CM Punk,
which he lost, it
is what it is. But yeah, I mean, he lost multiple times in that feud. I mean, also his feud against CM Punk. I think they were still kind of tinkering around, like, how do we use this? But it wasn't until he beat the streak at WrestleMania 30. The moment that kind of defines his career. I mean, Brock Lesnar was always good, but after that moment, he was a made man. Like, he's going to go down in his career as the person who ended the 21 winning streak of WrestleMania Undertaker matches. Like, he's the one who's going to. And then later, even that year,
how do you feel about that? How do you feel about him breaking the streak now in at the end of the decade?
I think I want to say, because I want to look at it at the time. At the time, I wasn't completely mad about it. I'm just going to be completely honest with you. I was shocked. I was shocked. I was 100% shocked. I thought the referee flubbed up. Like, I thought it was because I heard the third one, and legitimately, just as the arena goes like in confusion, was exactly the way I was. I was like, what happened? Did the referee mess up? Like in the Undertaker versus Brock Lesnar match? And there was a delay, and then the bell rings. Like, even though it's like even the bell person was kind of like, what's going on here?
All I remember is Paul saying, "Oh my God! Oh my!" Like,
sold it perfectly, right?
Sold it excellently, and I think that's that story's still one of the biggest unsolved mysteries that I wish they would do a WWE 24 on. Is that where it's like, who came up with the idea, who was mad about it, who didn't want it to happen? Because you remember when it came out, there were so many differing stories about who was cool with it. Like, remember they said Shawn Michaels didn't like it at all. Shawn Michaels was like pissed that it happened, and that Brock didn't want to do it either. But Undertaker and Vince had, like, I would love for someone to tell the story.
Well,
and get it from all sides.
I know Shawn Michaels knew about it, and because he talked about it on Jim Ross' podcast. I guess the Rise of Wrestling podcast is also a thing that happened this decade. But shout to us. But I know from Shawn Michaels sort of his recollection of it, and he doesn't speak of it in large detail, but he does speak like it was decided a couple hours before it actually happened. It wasn't this thing that was decided on throughout the days or anything like that. It also came down. It's a very dramatic story. I mean, after that, Undertaker faints backstage, and it's like he has to be taken out, and like
he got a concussion within the first minute of that match.
It kind of looks sad. It's like, and it kind of was like his last like hurrah, like his real last hurrah of being like the Undertaker, because now he's kind of like the spectacle guy. He's the guy they use part-time for events, Pop the House, et cetera. But as far as being used as an integral character in the WWE, I think this was the final sort of moment that we had.
Oh yeah, he'd still get Mania matches.
Oh yeah, he'd still get it, but he wouldn't be like, we didn't see him until the next Mania. Like, and then after that, we didn't see him until the Mania after that. And he loses once more at WrestleMania during this decade to a person that we'll talk about in this, in this entire thing. But what I think about with Brock Lesnar ending the streak now, it's absolutely perfect. Yeah, It was perfect for business. It was great for business. At least Undertaker can hang his hat on that, because the wrestling business has never boomed more since 2014, to be honest with you.
I think, honestly, there's so many like shocking moments. I probably put that at the top, like, at the top of just the decade alone. And there were a lot of great moments this decade. Right. But I think what it was like Vince McMahon, once again, seeing that there needed to be a shift. And a lot is said about his creative, mostly bad. But I think no one does these types of things better than him.
Right.
As far as shifting things and leaving things where people are either in love with it or they hate it, but you're still talking about it. We're still talking about it today. I mean, he's done a lot of fucked up shit this year, or not this year, but I mean, this 10 years.
Right.
But I think that there's still moments like that make you remember that he's like one of the best doing this.
I mean, the promoter of all promoters, right? Like, it's kind of crazy, but Brock Lesnar's return to the WWE, just another major thing. I think after that, I mean, can we talk a little bit about, if we're speaking about returns and things like that, can we speak a little bit about The Rock's return? The Rock really, in this decade, it's kind of a coup for WWE. I mean, he hasn't been used much in the last maybe 4 years or so.
Yeah, about 5 years. Yeah,
but to have the biggest star in Hollywood on your Rolodex, always a product of the WWE, kind of, it's major. And you saw another bit of drawing power once again, and saw how kind of the model change of let's do the attraction match at the beginning of the decade when The Rock returned in 2011.
I'm gonna tell you, I was pissed when he came back because I knew what it meant.
What did it mean to you?
It meant that Punk was losing the title.
I don't know I don't know if I initially thought that in the beginning, but it definitely did happen yesterday.
Yeah, it literally, I was like, oh, well, there you go. And it was remember, people were I'm
a Rock mark, so yes, I feel a much different way than you.
But remember how people felt about part-timers in the beginning of the year or the beginning of the decade, compared to the end of it, where we were like, fuck all these fucking part-timers, you got so much talent. But when we look back on them, no, they didn't.
I mean, true, yes.
But now we're like, okay, we really don't need them, and they're finally not really using them that much, which is cool.
They're not really. I mean, at this year's WrestleMania, we had Batista, another major star coming from the WWE sort of thing, and he wanted to have his last match, at WrestleMania. But The Rock's return, it was so major for the WWE, and it did such good business because it ended up being both of his WrestleManias end up being two of the highest grossing WrestleManias of all time, headlined by him versus John Cena. Kind of a changing of the guard and them, extending this entire feud. It's legitimately one feud that lasted 2 years, over the span of 3 WrestleManias. It's something that they don't do often, but still turned out kind of really, really well for them. And The Rock coming back and being that first major attraction star.
And say what you will, the matches might not have been crazy good. I thought that the first one was better. But which one did he hurt himself? The second one?
I think it was. No, it was the second one. It was the second one because he didn't come back. There was rumors of, and what do you think of the matches that never happened, right? The Rock,
Brock.
The Rock Brock, The Rock Triple H.
I think they could have at least did the Triple H match. I think that would have been. I think Triple H in this decade is the fact that we see him less is really a lot better. But also really cool because it's okay, we see him a lot less, but the matches he has are a lot better. When you look at some of the Triple H matches this year, against Roman, against Dean Ambrose, against Seth Rollins, and of course against Daniel Bryan, those are all really good matches because we didn't see him throughout the year. We didn't get that methodical style of all, the whole time. I think he would have been allowed to have a really good blockbuster match against The Rock. I think that would have been dope.
I think them kind of not doing Rock versus Brock 2, which would probably have ended in Rock versus Brock 3, I think it's probably one piece of business that they kind of regret because they know it would have been major nonetheless. Brock Lesnar, one of the biggest draws in professional wrestling. The Rock, one of the biggest draws in Hollywood. They have the story of it long ago, and ended up being translated into Roman Reigns' kind of story and sort of shifted into that. But I'm a huge fan of whenever he returns. I wish he would return a little bit more often on the surprise type of tip. Kind of just show up at a Monday Night Raw like he did a couple of nights ago or a couple of years ago and kind of take over. It's a great change of pace, especially for a 3-hour show.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, The Rock did great business, and The Rock's return this decade, once again, another kind of like major upside of WWE's, over the decade.
We have CM Punk here, and we've gone long form on him for like 2 hours before, but CM Punk's battle with the WWE and then inside and outside the company, obviously a huge part of the decade that started kind of putting the things in motion for what we see today, a start of it. So it's just like, if you haven't heard the CM Punk episode, go back to RNC Radio live channel. It is there. Right. I have nothing else to add to that story. Do you have anything else to add to that story, Meals?
So the CM Punk battle, I will say this, that CM Punk, this had a chance to be kind of the decade that he owned.
Yes.
Because it started so good at the beginning of the decade. I mean, he was already a multiple time world champion by the time the decade started. He kind of owned it in that with the pipe bomb promo and kind of went beyond. And as you continue to talk about that and then the exit with the WWE, he kind of became one of the biggest pro wrestling names this decade. But it wasn't until he went to UFC where things kind of went downhill, and then he kind of, now it's like it's not as great before. It ain't hitting. It ain't hitting the same. Yeah, it ain't hitting the same, unfortunately. But he had one of the chances to be kind of the biggest names of this decade, and I think what we lost with CM Punk, we gained with Daniel Bryan. Mm-hmm. And Daniel Bryan kind of, I mean, when we did our March Madness poll of the superstar of the decade, he was the winner, right? Yeah. Like, he's the one who kind of, from beginning to end, you can tell a story. You could do a movie about this entire deal, to be honest with you. It would be like a very like granola movie of this vegan who overcomes the odds and et cetera, et cetera.
A granola movie is hilarious.
But I mean, we talk about late fees. But the Daniel Bryan story kind of it starts off with the CM Punk, and then it kind of blends into Daniel Bryan, and Daniel Bryan is the one who ended up taking the hold because he gets everything that sort of that kind of CM Punk wanted, right?
Well, we thought and like Daniel Bryan's more like he's such a story about endurance and just like taking what you get and making it work. And really, like, he shifted the thought process of what a star could be and what we thought a star could be, because we always knew we had it in them. Yes. They didn't. And I don't think I've seen anyone disrupt the system. And I don't think we'll ever see anybody disrupt the system the same way that he did. Like, he overcame so much stuff. And it was like, that's why it makes it so tragic. But that's also why it makes it so amazing, his whole journey. This, in this past 10 years, like, this guy in the begining was 2010. He was on NXT. He got fired. Then 18 seconds at WrestleMania? Yeah.
That happened. So Daniel Bryan was never.
That was supposed to end him. That was supposed to like destroy him. Right. Those 18 seconds.
I mean, but it ended up fueling him, right? The yes chants became more loud and vociferous, and it from Team Hell No. The following WrestleMania, the sort of rise of just like, the talent like Punk and a lot of different other independent stars coming in WWE. And then when Punk left, it became like this sort of seismic shift. It was, I mean, the Yes Movement was something that WWE tried to, completely control.
But they couldn't.
They couldn't. They tried it in 2013, and they're just like, we're going to give him his moment, and then we're going to take it away, and then we're going to move on to the next moment because we have a guy, we have a plan, we have everything. The Dave Bautista versus Randy Orton match was the plan. I don't know how they decided they wanted to go through that in 2014. It even seems like years too late in 2014. But it was undeniable. Like, it became this entire thing, and you had that moment in the steel cage match where it it kind of you have these. Yeah, it peaked, and there's these very few moments of things that transcend professional wrestling. But that clip went viral. People started saying yes chants at various arenas and various sporting events and just various things around the world. You know, Daniel Bryan became the biggest name of professional wrestling, and then you couldn't ignore it. It culminated at WrestleMania 30. He won the WWE World Heavyweight Championship there. And unfortunately, from there, things took a turn. From there, he was forced to relinquish the title because of injuries that he had accumulated even from the Indies. I mean, in the same month he lost his dad too, which is crazy,
and got married.
It's really, I'm telling you, it's a great granola story. I'm telling you.
So from there he took 9 to 10 months off, came back to the ring, won the IC championship, and had to drop that literally like a month after he won it at WrestleMania 30. What was it, 31? Yeah, it was 31. And then from there, it became he had to actually retire. And so for 4 years, we pretty much had to wait. And, so many things had happened at that point. He had become the GM, the general manager on SmackDown, and we knew he hated that gig. You could tell he hated that gig.
It helped him in terms of just like being close to professional wrestling, but it didn't satisfy what he truly wanted to do.
I honestly think that had he not been on that contract, he would have left. Like the fact that he signed that extension right before, I think he signed it right before Mania 30. If he hadn't signed that extension, I think he would have been gone. I think he would have left. I don't think he wanted to do what he did because WWE kept telling him no.
They kept telling him no, even though he kind of went off in his own thing and did his own research. And by all means, he's done the work to get eventually cleared. But he took a lot of his own tests, probably paid with his own money, and said, hey, these are doctors that telling me that, like, listen, my brain is fine. And truly, I mean, he even said it on an episode of Talking Smack, like with the entire Miz moment, like, in a few months, I'm out of here. Like, I'm going to leave. Like, if WWE doesn't clear me, I will leave. And there's a big chance you would probably have, I feel like he would have probably done a lot more New Japan than AEW, but he probably would have been in AEW eventually. But
absolutely.
But
I'm glad he stayed.
I'm glad he stayed too, but I think a lot of it is he wouldn't have stayed. I think he pulled or he pushed WWE's kind of hand and saying, like, listen, let's do some more tests. I will, sign whatever you want to sign. I will take part in whatever you want to take part of. He has to get these concussion tests after every match. I don't know if it's still happening, but
probably not. I think he's fine now.
But he had to do that, but he was eventually cleared. And we remember the day because we immediately just decided, yo, let's do a podcast. Like,
that was epic.
Forget. And it was in the early days of our, of doing the podcast. It was a couple months of us into it, but it's just this story that you can't it's probably the feel good story of this decade of a man who kind of overcomes it all. And the one thing that he loved was taken away from him. And then he has the chance to kind of jump back into it.
I mean, he came back and he immediately made his case, I think, for wrestler of the decade, if not wrestler of the fucking year last year when he came back. I mean, it started off kind of weird, but I think from there, like as soon as he's, left the Big Cass feud and got to the Miz feud, I was all into it. I was like, okay, he's back. I mean, him and Miz has some classics, and I think people aren't even really talking about those right now.
No, I think, I'm biased, so yes. But
well, I mean, you're biased, but I'm co-signing you, bro. Like I'm co-signing that.
It was a real palpable feud. It was probably something that they probably could have tried to manufacture, but you can't because just the two sides of what both of them represent and things like that ended up being a classic kind of feud that ended in a kind of shitty way. But I mean, it might be rekindled. We're in the wild card era. It's a little bit different, but
I love the fact that he was just like, I told y'all about him and y'all didn't listen. That was one of the funniest things I ever seen.
But isn't that great from the character of The Miz and Daniel Bryan that they're able to flip the roles but still kind of keep the the rivalry and the feud?
Yeah,
like
let's get through this list. the CM Punk thing, I think what I was going to say leads right into the birth of the WWE Network, because it was all within the same year.
Mm-hmm.
The WWE Network
2014 was a great year.
Yeah, it changed the shape and the, how we consume this product. And I think, once again, you say what you want about Vince and that company, they foresee things. They foresee the change. Like, they saw Netflix getting the bag, getting all this money, and they said, you know what, we can get in on this too. We have a fucking tape library of millions of matches.
Let's talk about the true inception of the WWE Network. I was, doing some research ahead of this. WWE Network was initially a thought last decade, and of course it is, right? It's like the WWE, one of the biggest things ever. Of course, they want their own channel of all WWE content, and they're able to produce that. And they kind of
had it. They kind of had it with the
WWE Classics. Yeah, they flirted with it in the on-demand format, where it's just like, okay, you could go back, watch old Madison Square Garden matches and old promos and et cetera, blah blah blah. And then the idea of WWE Network came, and it was still a channel-based sort of deal. When the first promo came, we all remember the Skrillex Benny Benassi cinema, like I remember that. Like,
that was great. That was excellent.
We remember that promo, and we didn't really hear anything after that for a large amount of years, until I think it was early 2014 at a conference, where it's just like, the WWE Network will become this streaming subscription based, entity for professional wrestling. And it was like,
what? I don't think anyone believed it. And then they announced the fucking price. I remember the internet going crazy. $9.99 a month.
$9.99. I was like, what? You got me, bro. $9.99. First of all, at that period when it was announced, I had no job, but I had $9.99.
Like, it was crazy. Like, the first couple of months with it, I watched all old
everything
pay-per-view. Right? Like, it was so crazy, bro. Like, I nothing, like, I don't watch it as much as, like, I literally only watch the network for pay-per-views at this point.
Yeah.
And like the random special, I
might pull up to they've got just so much. I might pull up to like a one of those documentaries of like the Brett versus Shawn one, or the thing, like if I just want to watch something. But yeah, typically I don't watch it as much anymore. But
I never let it lapse.
Yeah, easily. Yeah, it's still what I will proudly submit my $9.99 to every month, and it'll probably go up in price eventually, and I won't care. Because $9.99 is still a great deal compared to the $59.99 that people pay for pay-per-views back in the day, and I guess last week.
Oh boy.
But it's still a great deal. Like, the WWE Network, it changed the business model of the WWE completely. Like, and selling it and pushing it, and their own subscription, everything became in-house. It didn't become like the whole conversation of pay-per-view buys anymore kind of just dissolved immediately, which I'm glad, because
it's archaic. It's like essentially archaic, because the way people consume things today is different, and they foresaw that change coming.
Which is not what they usually do. It's not a WWE thing to foresee things before other things happen. Like, it's not. WWE is usually behind on all sort of pop culture, or have, like, in the last decade, just bad, terrible taste on various things. Like, we had a Donald Trump versus what's her name, Rosie O'Donnell match before last decade. Like, they're not usually very forward thinking on things. So the WWE Network was like, whoa.
Yeah, and I mean, you got to talk of the bad too. I think there's a lot of things that could help. One thing, giving the actual wrestlers more money for this, giving them more profit off of this, I think would be spectacular. I don't know when that's going to come. I really hope it does. I think it's bullshit that they see a fraction of any. I don't think they see anything, actually.
I mean, it's kind of like streaming services now, right? Like, everyone gets their 1/100th of an eighth of a cent for every kind of stream. It's hard to quantify that and even, on this network, it's like, well, what do we see from it? If NXT TakeOver, from last night, if that, it becomes the biggest streaming thing, like who gets a piece of that? Like who gets a part of that? It's kind of hard to quantify. And I don't think WWE has figured it out, but I think they should have made an attempt. It's been like 5 years at this point. But
I think that they need to change the actual the form, like the actual like UI, the front end of the.
It needs to go.
It's bad. I really don't think that it's changed at all. I think that they need to really look at the way that they distribute stuff, and I also think that, and we're going to talk about this big huge moment for the network as well. But I think they need to add newer content from like Progress and all the other places that they have actual talent deals with. On the network, I would pay more for that. I think $9.99 is a robbery at this point for what they offer. I would not mind paying more than that for this, but I mean, for the fact that we have NXT alone, I would pay more for longer NXT episodes and longer takeovers that have more than one women's match, or just period. But speaking of NXT, from the WWE network, we get NXT. Words escape me. I think we could do a whole show on just.
I mean, we have a whole show on NXT.
Yeah. I mean, like the I know impact of it. The impact of it. I think we, of course, shout out to Eric Hollow. NXT is growing too much for us to give it the proper time. But
it deserves time, man.
That we needed to give it, and I'm glad we have a show like that. But that's a testament to how big this has become. It's worldwide now, and growing. NXT, that revolution. Listen, we have manias now that are all NXT alumni. Can you fucking believe it?
It's crazy. It's crazy that the business model that sort of Triple H kind of saw what was happening in the developmental area, and this decade also includes kind of the rise of Triple H as more of a corporate figure as opposed to just a professional wrestler. I mean, he kind of ruled the last decade, and now he's kind of giving back. He took what was once FCW, which I was talking about it last night because I was watching this Triple H documentary of his road to WrestleMania. And just seeing all of the things, I mean, if you haven't watched it, it's phenomenal. Just watch it. It's called Creation and Destruction, Triple H's Road to WrestleMania. And
I'm like halfway through.
It's so good because you kind of see just a major part of his day, but he took this brand from FCW, said, the wrestlers aren't getting, are we really doing a service to us if we don't provide the best kind of things for our talent to cultivate them to create the next era of bigger stars? Like if we, that period from like, to me, 2008 to like 2012 is kind of like a weird period.
It was very dire. John Cena had no dancing partners at all.
No, he didn't really. And that's why he was kind of he was on top as long as he was for almost 15 years. But, they did their best, and we got the PC from it. We've got, which is a state of the art. I don't know any other, just kind of.
I have been to the PC.
Talk about it.
The PC is unlike anything I've ever seen. I just as far as like a tome or a mural to this company, it's just like
a monument, even, man.
Yeah, like though they have old posters, they have the rings, they have a fucking recording studio where you record stuff, you can do promos. They have a whole section that we weren't allowed to see, where we went in there where it was like, I think the only time you've ever seen it is when you see like them do promo stuff and pre-tapes on the actual shows. But it's like they have an entrance ramp where people can practice their entrances all day. It's like, it is literally like I wouldn't even say it's a playground, but it's actually the first fully functioning, if you could call it, that office for these guys. And Triple H kind of, and again, like, this probably doesn't make them any money, but I think in the long term it will. They see that you got to lose money to make money here, and all of the talent that they have there are so fucking incredible. And people can say what they want about buying out the indies, but I mean, there's good and bad with that. you're giving them a livable wage where they don't have to like, you know, kill themselves.
Right. Drive 400 miles to the, you know, next town for $20 for a match. You get,
and that's part of the, you know, that's part of the business, but it's like they have the PC and I think, you know, the PC culture is very different from the main roster culture. And I'm not even going to deny that. Like they got it good there.
Right.
And it's so good there. Like they're in a bubble, you know, the main roster is literally the real world, but you know, everything that they have created here with NXT, even right down to people like, I mean, let's just name some of the alumni: Sasha Banks, Bayley, Charlotte, Becky Lynch, Roman Reigns, Seth Rollins, Dean Ambrose,
Finn Balor,
Bray Wyatt, Neville, Sami Zayn, Kevin Owens, Jesus Christ, Aleister Black, Ricochet.
Right.
Like, all these people have gone through the NXT mold, and they've all had, I mean, a something to say or something to do on NXT TakeOver.
And talk about a viable brand, right? Like we are excited for takeovers just as we're excited for WrestleMania.
There have been 25 of these things. I can name some weak ones. I can't name a bad one.
Right.
At all.
Yeah.
It doesn't exist. I don't think there's been a streak like this ever. And every time we say it's gonna, you know, what about, you know, this card isn't so strong, they'll pull a TakeOver 25 on us.
Right. Because just the talent that they have there and what they instill with them and sort of stealing the show. And it's such a high, you know, it's just something to sort of live up to. It's crazy. The WWE network has taken NXT from NXT Arrival, which came out the week that the network launched, to now 25 takeovers later. I mean, we've seen incredible. The first ever 5-star match that WWE got in multiple years happened on NXT TakeOver. Johnny Gargano versus Andrade Cien Almas. And,
he did it twice.
Yeah. It's incredible. We've gotten so many superstars. We've gotten so many moments. We've got so many things. It's become its own sort of brand. It becomes it's a brand that people go back to revitalize their career. It's a brand where they take the talent that we've gotten to sort of mold them. So by the time they hit WWE, they're ready, and to be able to willingly accept it. Triple H has done an amazing job, and just an incredible job at seeing what we've got here. And, you know, we all hope one day that it'll translate to the main roster and things like that. But just working with the talent that they have there, taking it from what FCW was and a lot of bad things that happened with that, the low talent, the terrible trainers, the sort of bad system, all these other things, and saying like, whoa, like just less than a decade later, transforming it into like, my God.
We did it. We fucking did it. Speaking of the indies, huge, just growing. I think you have to credit promotions like PWG. You have to promote, you know, you have to give a lot to like Progress, WXW, so many, Evolve, all of these places kind of they were a breeding ground. I think they were like a second NXT here for, you know, so to speak, for other companies like ROH, Impact, now AEW, WWE.
How do you feel that ROH has done in this decade? It's one that was kind of thriving and kind of had this very independent, like sort of last decade had that independent sort of reputation to it, but it had a reputation that was strong.
I don't think we give them enough smoke for what they've done. I really don't. I think the fact that I'm not as engaged, and I think honestly I'm probably be more engaged in Impact than I was in ROH this year, just based off of just like kind of the cooler matches that they've had this year, or just even really just the tragic, terrible, funny shit they've done. But I mean, I don't think we give ROH enough smoke for what they did.
No, I
think they let Bryan go at the top of the decade. They let Bryan go. They let
Tyler Black.
They let Tyler Black go and didn't do anything with him. I think they stopped being a breeding ground and they stopped being like a preparation for these guys, and they just kind of let everyone go. They let Leo Rush go, Keith Lee. They let Dijak go. All these people they fumbled. They let AJ go.
Right.
You know, AJ was there for a minute. They let the Young Bucks go. You know what? I'm not even gonna say that they let the Young Bucks go. They let the Young Bucks do whatever the fuck they wanted to there.
Yeah, pretty much.
They left them high and dry. Because I mean, even like the Hardys were there at one point.
Right. It had such a fantastic reputation and just a series of matches. I mean, the Punk Samoa Joe sort of rivalry, the Daniel Bryan's rise, the Nigel McGuinness. You even had like former WWE guys like James Gibson and other people kind of come in and kind of revitalize their career. Even Eddie Guerrero had a match at RH, I believe,
No,
right?
I think the best thing that they did for this decade was their partnership with New Japan, who really needed it at the time. And I think New Japan got a lot more out of it than they did, to be honest, because it helped New Japan really gain their surge in popularity because it brought them to the eyes of the American audience. It started kind of like from their World of Worlds pay-per-views with Liger and Nakamura at the time. Hey, Nakamura at the time, and Tanahashi and Okada. And it kind of like grew from there, where it was like, New Japan is kind of bolstering their ROH shows and not the other way around anymore, because these people are way more popular at this point.
I agree. I mean, talk about New Japan. New Japan was, I would say, last decade was never on my radar. I know it existed. I couldn't tell it from, I was like, IWGP, New Japan, like where are we going? Noah, who are all these people? Where do they come from? What are we doing? I just know the people that have come from it. But I think with, their partnership with ROH, yes, they got the most out of it. I think also the rise of the Bullet Club kind of becoming a name in professional wrestling with these American guys. So you had that kind of American face to...
And Irish with Finn.
And Irish, of course. Had this American face on Japanese professional wrestling. And things like... And I also think, just the rise of social media and the internet, too. It became a lot more... The ability to share amazing moments and amazing things that happen in professional wrestling only grew. But New Japan has, while it hasn't like fully, and I don't know if it ever will, considering this is kind of WWE's territory, they have made their mark in the United States. I mean, I think
they did at one point. I think now it's kind of spooky for them without all the
AEW talent that have become executives. Yeah.
I wish I could say I saw a better outcome for them right now. I really don't know what they're gonna do. I don't think interest has been lost, but I think a lot of the people that they did bring, I don't know if a lot of them stayed. And that's scary to me.
What highlights would you say were for New Japan this decade? Because the earliest I remember is seeing Shinsuke Nakamura for the first time and just falling in love.
I think obviously having Wrestle Kingdom, Wrestle Kingdom 10 was a huge one. I think just them being able to integrate people like Jim Ross into the product as well, and them taking a huge step into being more not Americanized, but bringing their style and making Americans kind of see like this is an alternative. I think they were the first company that was like, this is a pro wrestling alternative. Like, and the war stuff was really overblown. I think people tried to make a war out of it when it was just like, hey, this could just be second. This could just be the second thing you watch. I think that was a huge moment. I think all the Tanahashi Okada matches this year that happened, I think Nakamura becoming of kind of like, people saw what Nakamura was, and they finally got to see who this guy was. I remember seeing him for the first time and being like, holy shit, this is my new favorite fucking wrestler. I think Nakamura was a huge part of that. AJ Styles' run, where the first fucking match he won the IWGP Heavyweight Championship, fucking incredible. I think that Okada and Okada just having a crazy fucking run, whether you love it or hate it, being the longest reigning IWGP champion and having really great fucking matches along the way. Obviously, with like Kenny Omega, had a great match with Shibata, which a lot of people are going to put on their number one matches of the decade for this year. Which had a really tragic ending. I don't know if you remember when Shibata headbutt.
Yeah, I saw that headbutt. I remember that.
It's hard for me to watch that match. Really hard for me to watch that match. There's so many great things that happen. Like Naito's rise was amazing. Kenny Omega's G1 run, which to me is still one of the most incredible things I've ever seen, as far as people like, a star finally arriving. I think New Japan managed to break 3 fucking guys this decade. One of them being obviously Okada, Omega, and Naito. What they did with them after that, it's up to you how you decide that. But I think it was just, they built 3 really top guys that did really great business for them.
I think the G1, another major highlight of this decade for all the things that come from it. But I think that could be sort of WWE doesn't do the G1. No other company does the G1. You see like the success of like, the world tournament for soccer every year, and sign up people who, are invested in that and on their lunches and all this other thing like that. I think the G1 could be another thing kind of highlighted like that if it became this sort of worldly tournament. Like it became somewhere where it's just like, because it's on all day. It's pretty much on all day. Like there's no way I'm catching every match. Like it's on forever, various nights. I thought we've all experienced it. Like what? It's on tonight? Like
every single day.
But it's so great. And it's such a great week for professional wrestling that I don't think any other business or professional wrestling company has. I think they need to sort of focus on that more, because you're really telling the story from there to Wrestle Kingdom. And that's the part you need to really kind of loop people in. But
it really helps build the guy. It helps build that next challenger. I know a lot of times the winners were like, the winners of the G1 this year were honestly like Okada, Tanahashi, Omega, Naito. Like it was like there weren't a lot of like, but I still say you got really great matches out of it. I think Tanahashi Ibushi is one of my favorite fucking matches I've ever seen in my life. I love that fucking match.
Right.
But next up, well, we have there's a lot of shit that happened this decade. This is a very daunting thing. But one thing I do want to talk about is the women's revolution, and just let's kind of like circle around that.
The women's revolution, everyone will tell you 40 different ways of how it started, especially on the WWE end. Nikki Bella will tell you one thing, Paige will tell you another thing, Michael Cole will tell you one thing, Stephanie McMahon will tell you one thing. The women's revolution started, and now it's become like trademarked, right? Like it's the women's revolution is like a thing instead of like an actual like movement. But it started during this decade because of the lack of time that women were getting, and honestly, the disgusting and kind of embarrassing amount of time women were getting compared to men on the roster, especially talented women. And it started, as a result, there was there was AJ Lee really demanding more, especially for women from pay and women with time, and looking at it like that. And the fact that it garnered such attention on social media kind of pushed WWE's hand to say, let's do more. Mm-hmm. And it happened coincidentally with Triple H and the NXT rise and the great women that were featured in NXT having these great, amazing matches.
It's great.
I
think the new kind of right before WrestleMania, was it 32?
31.
Was it 30? No, 31 was in
31 was in LA. Well, depends what you're mentioning.
Stephanie's announcement of the new belt. That's when it started.
32. That's 32. You think that's when it started? I feel like, it
didn't start. I think NXT kind of was just like its own entity at that point. I think when the main roster.
You think when the main roster starts at that, because we saw our first women's main event ever in NXT on a card. I think.
How many people were? I take it as like how many people were watching that.
That's true. Yeah, you're right.
They were. How many people were really like looking at that and saying, "Okay, it's here now." I think when Stephanie came out, showed that belt off, and said, "Okay, this is what y'all fighting for. The diva shit is over." Like that was.
You're women now. You're superstars now, as opposed to divas.
And they had that triple threat between Charlotte, Becky, and Bayley. That was
Sasha.
Sasha. You're right. Bayley took a long time to get up there, man.
Bayley did, but Bayley did the work. So everyone did the work. We've had amazing NXT. To me, while the main roster definitely like christened it, like, yes, we are here. This is it. It starts now. Women's Championship. NXT did a lot of the groundwork because you had that first women's main event. Mm-hmm. You had that first women's Iron Man match. You had that, to me, 5-star match, Sasha Banks versus Bayley, NXT TakeOver Brooklyn. I don't think
anyone says no to that.
People have said no because it's not an actual 5-star match, according to Meltzer. But 5-star match to me because, my God. But they did a lot of that groundwork and sort of building it there. And they kind of pushed the main roster, and a lot of women was like, well, they're having the time down there. Why don't we get the time up here? And it's like, well, a different guy owns it. But throughout this decade, what we've seen on the television, I mean, Becky Lynch is a name that has become synonymous with this decade over the last like 18 months, 19 months, maybe almost 2, who has become synonymous because she kind of broke the mold and she became the biggest star in the company.
She transcended. I think Charlotte was always the name. Like, she was the name. Mm-hmm. But Becky transcended that name because she's not a third generation, second generation star. She is, she is who she is, and I think people, a lot of times, like, I say that people gravitate towards non-generational talent more so than they do, like, generational talent, because it's like they remind us of us. They're blue collar. Mm-hmm. And I think that was a major thing. Like, same way Sasha gravitated, same way Bayley gravitated to a lot of people, because that's what it was. Like, there's no doubt in my mind Charlotte's like the best. But I think as far as like impact, I think those three absolutely did. Those three and Asuka absolutely made such an impact on just the regular, just everyone, the everyday person,
right.
Like, I meant a lot. They're very relatable in a lot of ways, and I think that's what the WWE needed to do, is make these women relatable. Like, they are your daughters, they're your sisters, they're your aunts. Like, these are people that they need a chance as well, and I think that they got a lot more work to do.
And honestly, another thing that helped with that is Total Divas. I can't tell you how many people know. How many women that I come across know some of these women just from that reality television show, being able to sort of cross brand and cross promote. And WWE has done a lot of that over the last decade with that, ESPN, a lot of different places where they've kind of cross promoted, cross brand type of deal. But, just from there on, that's helped. The amount of women that they've gotten, the women's roster in the WWE must have tripled from where it was 10 years ago. Because there's just so much talent, and there's so many women, and there's so much things. And the fact that we got a main event, the main event of WrestleMania 24 was headlined by women. It was something. 34. 24 was by the old dudes. 34 was headlined by women. It was unfathomable to me, even like 7 years ago.
You also have stuff like them performing or being able to perform in overseas in areas where like they never would usually do so. And I think that like a lot is said of the Saudi Arabia thing, but like I do think that they should absolutely pull out of that. Like I think they should stop until the women are allowed to do that. I think if you're trying to trailblaze, don't trailblaze sometimes, and then you can't trailblaze here. You gotta do it all the time. I think that they and when I say they have a lot of work to do, it's like they purposely go back on what they say on this a lot of times. It's like you can't be gearing up for a women's main event and then kind of cut them off at the knees one week because you got to build a Saudi Arabia show 2 times a year. Like, that's just bullshit to me. But yeah, I think as a whole, it's a net positive for the women's revolution. I think it's a net positive. They're trying to.
I agree. Speaking of main event in WrestleMania, I don't think they could have got to that point without one more factor that sort of ended up in this, and it was Ronda Rousey.
Yeah.
Ronda Rousey.
Brock level.
Ronda Rousey getting signed to the WWE last year. She's in terms of her decade, she was, the most notable star in UFC. She was UFC's first big star, like major, transcend in movies, in on shows, on anything, Olympic athlete, all these other things. And then she lost multiple times. Not all good things last forever. But she lost multiple times, and she decided, listen, I'm going to pursue something that I've really, really loved for a long time. And we saw her at WrestleMania 31 and what she did there. 2 years later, she signs to the WWE, debuts at the Royal Rumble, and we go through this entire year of Ronda Rousey. How do you feel like, I don't think we're done with Ronda Rousey in the WWE just yet, but I think the first chapter of her career in the WWE has been written. How do you feel about that?
I agree with that. I think that we talk about generational talent. I think she's carved out her own section there. Like, she is a once in a lifetime. I don't think I've seen anyone pick it up as quickly as she has. No one, like from Mania all the way down. I obviously we have problems with the social media stuff and the promos and stuff like that. But when it came to in ring, there was nobody better in there. Matches with like Charlotte, matches with Sasha, matches with Becky, all that stuff like that was amazing. I think she pulled out some really amazing stuff that I'd never expected. No one ever expected her to be that good. We just expected her to kind of come along and, kind of be a tourist, so to speak. And she wasn't. Like, she was training at the PC. She was there Raw every week, bro. Like, I've never seen anything like that.
It was, especially in the the current Brock Lesnar era. Brock Lesnar is not at Raw every week. Her being there and just like, hey, I'm trying to learn and I'm trying to just be one of the people there and I'm trying to get the entire experience and kind of take it all in, as opposed to being holier than thou and getting the resentment because of that. Now, she got the resentment anyway. It doesn't matter. Wrestling fans are wrestling fans.
And she's a Sandy Hook truther, so.
Yeah, well, that is also. But her natural talent and that run, she won the women's championship. She held it for a long time. I don't think any of her matches were bad. I think she's brought more attention to the women's division, even when matches like versus Alexa Bliss at SummerSlam and versus Nia Jax at multiple events, and that match versus Sasha Banks at the Royal Rumble. A completely underrated, overlooked match because it's incredible.
It's a great. I think the Becky Asuka thing kind of.
Yeah, the Becky Asuka thing, the Becky winning the Royal Rumble thing, multiple things overshadowed it. But I don't think both women get enough credit for that match this year. It kind of gets hidden because the intensity and the feelings and the motivations and everything heading into that match was just incredible. And all culminated at WrestleMania.
Yeah,
and
I don't think you have a women's main event without Ronda there, and I think you can be absolutely honest with that. Like, there's no women's main event without Ronda.
No, I agree. Yeah.
So next on this list, we have Hulk Hogan and Gawker.
Whew.
I was at a Young Thug concert when he got fired.
I was in my bed, but I remember it. I remember the night.
It was a tweet or something, or a news. It was like immediate. They fired the shit out of him immediately.
They fired the shit out of him is exactly how I would personify it. It happened on
it's like a Sunday,
July 24th, I believe. July 24th. WWE, what did it say? I'm trying to find the exact words because they shut him all down. They like took his merch off. They took everything off. They stopped using him and
scrubbed him completely.
Completely. It was like he was another person. Oh
wow. Oh.
But it said, I'm trying to find the exact quote. It says WWE World Wrestling Entertainment has severed ties. WWE terminated its contract with Terry Bollea, aka Hulk Hogan. WWE is committed to embracing and celebrating individuals from all backgrounds, as demonstrated by the diversity of our employees, performers, and fans worldwide. The video came out during this entire. Actually, it started with Hulk Hogan versus what's his face, Bubba the Love Sponge.
Yeah,
type of deal because he banged her wife. Like, what a terrible friend.
White people crazy.
It's crazy. And then for some reason they filmed it, and Gawker obtained the video and released the video of Hulk Hogan on a racial tirade, and it is the racial tirade of all racial tirades. It is, as much as now, as we're into this latter decade, people have become accepting and potentially forgiving and maybe tolerating. I'll say this. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't say understanding. I don't understand it. you racist. That's what I understand.
I don't think he, and I mean, he comes back, you know?
He comes back. And I never thought he wouldn't come back, to be honest with you.
I don't think he's worth it.
I don't think he's worth it either. But he's back nonetheless. I mean, the name is still Hulk Hogan, but I don't think he's worth it at all. But then again, I'm a young black male, and I also talk to other black males.
White, black, whatever. There are other white males that think Hulk Hogan's okay to come back.
It's
actually there are. I've seen it.
Yeah, to me, what he did was unforgivable, and it was unforgivable for a long time, and it's still unforgivable to a lot of people, and it's still not acceptable. And to me, in terms of, especially now, we talk about this Lars Sullivan deal. He hasn't done the work to me, nor has shown the. He said he got caught. He said that it was released all everywhere, and people saw what kind of big racist orange piece of shit he is. But he hasn't done the work to sort of obtain the forgiveness of people of color and of people that he affected in that racist rant. He hasn't done it. He's just come back and said, I'm sorry. I'm really sorry for saying it. It's like, all right, well, prove also you can be sorry, but also you can also still be racist and be sorry for getting caught about the things that you did. Like, what he said to me is still unforgivable. Like, the words that he used, even if I read back what he said on that day, and I still get triggered by it, because he didn't just say, like, that he went in.
It was more than just the N-word. It was just a tirade on blacks as a whole.
Right. So, I mean, this became an entire thing, severed all ties. He wasn't featured on any WWE programming for a long time, until I think about last year.
Yeah, a year and a half ago about.
They started slowly bringing him back in. They started slowly incorporating him.
I'll say one thing. The reactions for him coming back haven't been like huge reactions at all.
I mean, they brought him back in Saudi Arabia.
Yeah.
Officially away from WWE soil. But yeah, the reactions haven't. I mean, I think they realize also that they don't necessarily need Hulk Hogan in 2019. It's not a name that rings bells, to be honest with you. He's a notable name. He's still the Babe Ruth of professional wrestling in terms of just name.
Yeah, but Babe Ruth was racist too.
There you go. I mean,
turn
on contracts, me how, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But yeah, it's I
think this also is a bigger conversation of a lot of people holding these legends accountable for what they do in this age now. I mean, you see it with Jim Cornette, you see it with JR, you see it with a lot of
Moolah.
Moolah. It's like this is the age of accountability for for essentially a fake sport now. It's the age of accountability, even right down to like social media, like whatever people say, like we're holding these people accountable, and whether they want to admit it or not, like the big companies have to pay attention to it.
Do you feel like we've gotten the professional wrestling business and the diversity of it all has improved? It's probably the best it's ever been, right?
Best it's ever been. We have black champions all over your TV right now.
We have black champions. We have we have a diversity of talent. I mean, Mustafa Ali, incredible. Someone that people can genuinely get behind. Yeah. You have Rey Mysterio, Andrade Cien Almas, the Lucha House Party.
Kyrie, Asuka, Nakamura.
It's... they've expanded to China, they've expanded to India, they've expanded to South America, they've expanded to, all these different type of places where we've incorporated all these races and showed that WWE isn't just one color. I mean, the top guy right now is a person of color. He is Samoan.
And a decade before, it would have been the Great Khali.
Yeah. Yeah, it would have been the Great Khali. And he comes out and he's large, he's Indian, his choice of match is the Punjabi prison.
It's so stereotypical and racist.
Yeah, I mean, even in we love Crime Time, but Crime Time itself, a very stereotypical kind of deal, and it kind of shows we don't get that as much anymore. I think credit. One of the credits we should have on that is kind of New Day, right? New Day kind of turns the head on what like the stereotypical kind of superstar is. Shinsuke Nakamura as well. Shinsuke Nakamura in the last decade would have been Kenzo Suzuki, you know? And then he comes in and he kind of transcends whatever, you know, just Asian American stereotypes. He comes in, he's this rock star. They compare him to, you know, Prince and Michael Jackson and all these other things. Like Kofi Kingston is world champion. Kofi Kingston, WWE champion.
Love it.
It's crazy. It's crazy.
I mean, Street Profit. This is 24 hours after, but you know, Street Profits.
Street Profits tag team champions.
I popped more for. I'm not gonna lie. I popped more for Profits.
I understand. I'm not gonna take it away. I also popped. But it is what it is. Like, but it's just so much. It's a great melting pot, and even, you know, I think this decade as well, you know, we're in Pride Month right now. A lot of WWE superstars able to be themselves. I mean, how big was the news when Darren Young came out, and he kind of came out on a whim. It was to TMZ. It was, I believe, a bit before SummerSlam 2000. It was a bit sometime in this decade. It was definitely in this decade. He comes out on TMZ, and there hasn't been really an openly gay WWE superstar. Like
now you got Sonya Deville. I mean,
and now you got Sonya Deville. Pat Patterson, who's been, you know, gay for a long time, came out as well.
He's been gay for a long time.
Sorry. I mean. Okay. And a lot of different other superstars. I mean,
I think that the dedication to diversity has paved the way for, I mean, podcasts even like this one and so many others that feature people of color. I don't think we've ever seen as many people that look like us talking about this in my life. You know, it was mostly like schoolyard, you know, in the crib type stuff, and now it's like broadcasting to the world, and it's crazy, you know. The people that we're able to affect people to, you know, talk about this, and we also are teamed with people on this very network that look like us, to talk about it and dress like us and think like us. You know, it's crazy.
Right, 100%. We got two more topics.
We've gone long form on one of them. I think I'll close my eyes and point right at AEW.
Okay.
We spoke of the indies and that revolution, and of course, we are now going into a new decade with the idea that, you know, there's going to be yet another competition,
another major company.
It started with Impact, and now we're going right into AEW at the top of this, you know, this next decade, owned by wrestlers. So we'll see how that works.
I think, you know, I'll say this about AEW. It's definitely a shift in the environment for professional wrestling. It's a shift in terms of now that there's another major company that isn't like Impact Wrestling. And, you know, we shit on Impact Wrestling, but they've made a lot of decisions where they can be rightfully shitted on. But it's a viable another option for a company as of right now. They still have an entire decade to sort of build their name and go through the ups and downs of being a startup company and start a professional wrestling company, and how you treat professional wrestlers and stories and building, et cetera, et cetera. But as of right now, it's a viable second option where, you know, we see the continued growth of talent in the WWE. There isn't, we've seen it. We talk about it, wild card rule, all these other things. There's not enough time for all the talent. And we're also at a period right now where a lot more, you know, superstars are frustrated with their position on the card than they've ever been before as well.
Yeah, because as good as it is right now, not everything is good. You know, there is, again, in the past 2 years, and the guy we'll talk about next is definitely a big part of that. But like, creative is not wild, you know, like creative is up and down, and a lot of people aren't getting their opportunities. Like WWE signed all these great people. And remember, we said, oh man, they signed a lot of good people. A lot of these people are not being used, and they need a place to go.
And AEW presents an option. And AEW is owned by Tony Khan in the executive committee, Cody Rhodes, the Young Bucks, Brandy Rhodes, Kenny Omega. It's a professional wrestling company owned by professional wrestlers, which is interesting. I mean, yes, it works. But in terms of, we'll see how it kind of translates for putting on the business mind instead of professional wrestling mind and seeing how that works. But I'll say this, I'm looking forward to what happens in terms of, does this continue to create a very sustainable environment for professional wrestlers and for professional wrestling? And it does continue to add to the content that we have, because there's so much content right now. And that is it.
Yeah. I mean, we've gone long for a minute, but we just have to mention the fact that, hey, the next decade is going to get real mixy. It's going to get real spicy. It's already getting spicy.
It's already spicy, but it's going to get way more spicy.
I can't think of anything to end this off with this guy.
Damn, he main events this show too. Shit.
Yeah, this decade has really been, again, in a lot of ways, like up and down for him. Tragedy, triumph, insane. Roman Reigns, I think he is kind of like the beacon for everything right and wrong with main event booking on a major program. I think that we spent very large time this decade talking about what frustrates us about him for him being so good. He was never able to really be himself. He was never really loved until like now.
That's a long time going without being loved, by the way.
Yeah, 5 years is a long time. I think Roman Reigns is absolutely one of the most misunderstood and mishandled guys that has made it work and has still managed to be one of the top guys. I think I've never seen someone the boys in the back love him. Everyone else hates this guy. Like, people have called him Lex Luger, and I get it, completely understand it. They made him look like a fucking bumbling idiot as a main event face. The one thing I will say right now, what they're doing with the faces, they made the faces in WWE look very strong and smart and cool and awesome, because Roman Reigns looked like the biggest idiot. They were purposely almost getting people to boo him because of how stupid he will always look. He lost every big match he's ever had.
Yeah.
It was ridiculous.
When it mattered, he lost. When it mattered, he lost. So Roman Reigns, the evolution of it was through this entire decade. I mean, he comes up in FCW. They try to do the Samoan thing with him. It's like, let's scrap that. The Shield. And the Shield, again, a major force this entire decade. All three guys, major talents. I mean, Dean Ambrose John Moxley is now in AEW. Seth Rollins is world champion. Roman Reigns is pretty much the new face of the WWE. Whatever with the Shield that they did, it worked. But then Roman Reigns goes out on its own and becomes now it's like, will they or won't they? And it never was this thing with previous stars. It never was this thing with the Austins or the Hogans or the Cenas in terms of, do we want this guy to be the guy or do we not want this guy to be the guy? He's still the guy, but he loses. But, we also have, I don't think business has affected the WWE as much more now than it has now, because I feel like business decisions really have affected the way they've kind of moved forward with Roman Reigns, especially with Brock Lesnar at the helm. And Brock Lesnar is a major part of we haven't done it yet, because
think about how they positioned, even with Brock Lesnar. I think he has more reigns than Roman does. Roman has only had 4 title reigns.
Probably combined of 3 months, maybe.
Yeah, 4. One of them was a month.
Yeah.
Well, his most recent one ended in a month, I think, because of just tragedy.
Yeah.
But none of them over 100-something days. He's never had a Cena run. I think Seth has probably already beaten his combined runs, period.
Yeah.
They've never positioned this guy to look like anything other than an idiot for a large part of and it was this is the frustration with Vince as well.
Idiot isn't such an idiot word. I feel like it's more so, we either doing it or we're not. They made him feel like they built him up to say, yes, we can, and yes, he's capable. And then they said, nah, he's actually not. Like, that was the most frustrating part about it for me.
And
like,
he can beat everyone else.
He can beat everyone else but Brock Lesnar. He can beat everyone else until it actually mattered. He can hold it all until it's time to give it to somebody else. Like, it's just...
I think the best title program he had was when he got the Money in the Bank cashed in on him by Sheamus. And that was, I think, the peak of fan interest in him was then. Like, when they wanted to see him beat Sheamus. I think we don't give Sheamus enough credit for that either.
Right. And then, but then what does he do? I think he loses that. He wins it, but then he loses it at the Royal Rumble.
Yeah, to Triple H. One of the biggest political hits I've ever seen in my life, where they made him look... I know you didn't like the word idiot. They did make him look like an idiot during this program. He disappeared off TV for like a month.
I feel like he looked more of an idiot, but he won the Royal Rumble the previous year. And just the boo, it was such a bad look for WWE because you got The Rock there. I'm sure they were hoping The Rock would add something, but nope. Philly is just pouring the booze in. And I'm interested in hearing how he felt about it in terms of just like if it stunted any of his confidence, it stunted any of his like self-esteem, that he's doing the best they can. And they're just like ripping into him like crazy.
And the thing is, he's not even a bad wrestler. I think he got better. I think he's one of the top 5, at least top 10 in the main roster right now.
I mean, how do you feel about him beating The Undertaker at WrestleMania?
I think at that point I didn't care about The Undertaker anymore. I think it was like the match was so bad, I think was what I cared about the most. I was like, how Roman can't get anything out of that guy, you know?
Right.
He's not that. He's not an AJ Styles like talent where it's like he can get something out of everybody, or like a Seth Rollins talent where he can get something out of everybody. Like, he needs to have a foil because of just his style. Like, he can't lift The Undertaker up. Like,
yeah.
He can't do any of that stuff. So it's like, it was, I think it was just more the match was a disappointment than anything. I see what they were trying to do, but I don't think beating The Undertaker is better than him having a lot of reigns or a lot of lengthy reigns, you know, or one lengthy one. Like,
just being a strong champion. Yeah.
Even now, like, I don't see him ever getting one, you know, like I don't see it.
I feel like some tragedy would have to happen. Something would have to happen to someone, and they would have to be like, all right, let's put it on Roman real quick.
Yeah. Like, he's properly where he is. Like, do you see like right now where the way things are going, like, I don't see him factored in until at least the fall.
Yeah.
If not winter.
Like, yeah, I think once we start heading into like, okay, let's start but the WrestleMania programs, then that's where he starts flirting with the championship scene. But until then, yeah, he doesn't really need to.
I don't see, and he doesn't need to. And I think, you know, we're kind of sidestepping the elephant in the room, but like his cancer diagnosis was kind of a turnkey moment that made people kind of go back and say, like, were we too harsh on him, the man? Mm-hmm. And I say absolutely yes. Yeah,
how do you feel about, well, just a sidebar to this, the role of professional wrestling fans and entire this?
It's gotten more toxic this decade.
Yeah. With social media, yeah.
They made it more toxic. I think you had people, making petitions to try and stop him from being on TV and stuff like that. Like,
you had false information, which when it gets spread becomes this sort of wildfire, and then, you know, people react to certain things in certain different ways, and you got oppositions and all these other things. I think it's become a lot more toxic. I think personally everyone should just enjoy it is for what it is, or don't enjoy it and then don't watch it. I don't know what to tell you, but you're probably not going to stop watching it. I'll be honest with you. You're probably going to continue watching it.
Exactly. I mean, you know, this is a guy that has given a lot. And again, like when the diagnosis hit, it was like, hey, we should really like take a long, hard look at like Roman Reigns, the performer and the man, you know,
yeah, and appreciate.
And I think they do now. I don't think I've heard like a reaction to him, you know, as we've heard, but it's like, you know, when it comes down to it, like during those formative years, it was kind of like Cena in those like 2006, 2007, 2008 years, where it's like Roman, you know, they weren't giving him a lot, you know, There wasn't a lot to give him to cheer for. Like,
yeah,
he didn't have much. And I think like, other than like the Shield guys that he go against, like, none of his programs were particularly compelling against guys that we really liked.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the booking really hurt him a lot. And he's an example of terrible creative that's happened this decade, where it's like, what are y'all thinking? Like,
Right.
Nobody wants to see any of this shit. Like the Rusev shit was something that was like the most disappointing to me. Where it was like, why is he terrorizing this guy? Like, and we're supposed to cheer him, and he was getting booed.
Mm-hmm. It's crazy.
But I mean, you know, in the end, nobody had. He's like the LeBron of this decade. Nobody had more main events than he did. Nobody.
I feel like maybe he's more Steph Curry.
Seth, I was like, wow. None?
No. John Moxley, Seth Curry.
Oh wow. Turn that. I like that. Turn.
No, you gotta
get to the end of the show to hear that one.
You've got too much heat already. We don't need any more.
Oh wow. Anything. Nobody's doing anything to me. But that is RNC decade for the A show.
That is the RNC. I mean, we're counting down this entire week. We're going to have various shows. I think all shows at some point, except maybe a few, will focus on just looking back at the decade for all things. We've got amazing playlists. We have the RNC decade playlist of hip hop and R&B, and pop is coming up. I have pop in the pocket. That's at least 1,200 songs of just things that you remember from this decade and moments and all these other things to kind of like look back on and be like, wow, like this was really an amazing decade and a really formative decade in music and pop culture. I know we'll have a late fees one.
Mm-hmm.
A show will be we still got the regular A show this week. So if you're looking for the A show, we still got the regular ass A show this week. I mean, ain't regular ass, but you know.
Wow, that was. How about? Can you say anything to make them not watch it or not listen to it? That's crazy.
We got the same cool A show this week. Just two cool guys talking about professional wrestling. RSPN this week. They'll be doing an RNC decade thing. We got a lot in the tank. Word to Mark Henry. So yeah, stay tuned. It's a fun week. It's a fun week. Trust me.
All right, so I'm not even gonna continue with the pleasantries. Please tune in all week to RNC Radio Live and the A Show Network. For Mills, I'm Justin. Welcome to RNC Decade.